Welcome to Elite Broker, the podcast showcasing the leading players and stories of success from Australia's broking industry.
Hello and welcome back to Advisor Podcast Network. I'm your host for today, Annie Kane. In this week's episode, we're talking to someone who has not one, but two careers. Broker and pilot Rick Garner from Crew Financial not only is a broker in the Australian mortgage marketplace, but also, of course, is a pilot for Qantas. And he's not alone. His brokerage, Crew Financial, has been pulling together pilots from across the Australian industry, turning them into brokers and making the great Australian dream of home ownership come true. So today we're doing a cross collaboration with our sister publication, Australian Aviation, to find out Rick Garner's journey as a broker and, of course, as a pilot as well. So today we're joined by Rick and my colleague from Australian Aviation, the editor Adam Thorn. Hello, Adam. How are you going?
I'm doing very well. I never thought this collaboration would happen. This is because we have a very unique guest to make this insane collaboration work, but I think it's going to be good.
We do indeed. And Rick, you are our unique guest who is a broker and a pilot.
Well, it's a lot of pressure to come out as the unique guest, but thank you both for having me and looking forward to a great chat.
And this is really one of the things that makes our lives so much easier is when we have someone that we can talk to about not just one thing, but two different things, two different careers. And that we thought, what better opportunity to bring you in and talk to you about your passion for aviation and your passion for mortgages than on these podcasts.
Well, thanks very much. Yeah, it is a story of passion because, I've been flying since I was 14 years old. Absolutely love everything to do with the aviation industry, and I've done a truckload of things there, and I'm sure we'll get into that a bit later. But financial services is something I never really expected to get involved in, and it was actually part of my aviation life. I had a mentor when I was in my late teens, one of my employers, and he encouraged me to get involved in the business side of his aviation business, and then from there I developed a more of an interest in financial services. And there was one key quote that he threw out to me when I was quite younger, and I had a pretty responsible role in that business. I wouldn't trust me back then. I think I was like 21 or 22 or something, and he said to me, "Listen, you're going to come back to business at some point. You won't be able to help yourself." And sure enough, he was right. I tried to reject it, but it didn't happen. And 22 years, I think I've been involved in financial services now.
Oh, okay. So now I thought the story of Crew Financial was because of the COVID pandemic and all the pilots got stood down. So you lent into your broking career, but it sounds like you were broking for a long time.
Yeah, so a bit of a misconception. Crew Financial didn't just start out of the blue. I mean, certainly the COVID pandemic did a lot for putting our business on the map. We were able to help people where they really struggled. But no, I actually have a fairly lengthy financial services history. I spent more than 10 years as a financial advisor. I had an AFSL, and I've been with 3 aggregators over the time. But I did have a bit of a siesta. So maybe the bit that's missing is that because I've had dual careers, I did drop flying at one point back in the early 2000s. And after the GFC, a lot of us, if you recall, were a little bit fatigued. And so I decided to drop finance for a little bit of time and just focus exclusively on flying. And come 2018-ish, something like that, I just had old clients reaching out to me and saying, "Can you help me?" And I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll just do a few loans. and a few loans turned into now I think we've got something in the vicinity of 17 staff. So it's a few loans later, here we are.
Well, let's talk about your aviation career then. So obviously, Adam, this is your beat.
This is my beat.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with the same question I ask all the guests I have on, I say my podcast, now our podcast.
Yeah.
Where did the passion for aviation come from? You said you started flying when you were 14, which is already outrageous. Where does that passion? Why?
Well, that's an excellent question. I don't know, but I will tell you a story from my childhood. And apparently I was 3 when this happened. And an aeroplane was flying overhead the house where I lived in regional Victoria, and I said to Mum, "Oh, Mum, that's a biplane," she says. This is how the story was repeated to me anyway. And sure enough, it was. And she said, "Oh, I don't know, he obviously knows what that is." And I just remember all through my teens or my childhood through primary school, I used to go to the library, and I'm always looking at books of aeroplanes. And I thought, one day I have to do that. And as soon as I absolutely could, I went down to the local aero club and started doing theory lessons about flying. So all the basic sort of education for getting a private pilot's license back then. I did all those tests and exams and stuff, and I always made sure that all of my sort of work experience through high school, always made sure I did that at the airport, and I just loved it. I mean, flying is so much fun. It's it's a technical thing, but it's really liberating, and it's just interesting. You get up, the mobile phone doesn't ring, or at least it shouldn't, and it's great going around. It's a great perspective of the world, and it's just a fun job.
So you said 14 was when you kind of had this first flight. Do you remember that?
Absolutely.
Talk
I've
me through it.
got the photos. I've got everything. But I wasn't a great pilot to start out with, and some of my friends would probably say I'm not that great now. But I do remember this: that the first 7 lessons, I remember vomiting every single time, and I persisted. And I had a great flying instructor, really fun, diligent instructor, and his poor headset bags. We've got a headset bag that, we're wearing headsets now, and they come in a nice sort of sealed plush bag. That poor guy's headset bag got vomited into by me for the first 7 lessons, but I did get my stomach, and we were able to break through it. But so fun for me, not so fun for him.
So you start off, you have your flying lessons, you've done all the theory, and you then get a job at a charter airline. Am I right?
Yeah.
And then you get seduced, boo hiss, by the business side of things. It seems amazing that you can be so tunnel vision on doing one thing, but then another side creeps in that also kind of grabs your interest.
Yeah, well, just before that, so I moved from regional Victoria to Canberra. Great place to live. And they had a class, year 11 and 12. They actually had an aviation program. It was one of the early ones, because this is a long time ago, right? This is the mid-90s. And I met my best mate there, and he's a Qantas pilot now, which is really great. And so there was about 15 of us going through this program, and so that added to it. And of course, come the end of school, well, I knew I wanted to be a pilot, but piloting jobs are really hard to get, especially in those times. We still had the hangover of the pilot strike. There was not a lot of opportunity, and so if I wanted to be in this industry and hopefully one day fly planes, well then you needed to do some extra work, or find an angle or a way to get in. And in my case, it was getting a job. I actually got a job in the engineering department first, and I was responsible for looking at spare parts and numbering all those and cataloguing them. But anyway, eventually they let me into the operations side of things. And whilst I wasn't flying, I was still getting my commercial pilot's license at that point. And they introduced me to the business side of things there. So whilst I wasn't technically qualified at that point to fly, at least professionally, I was able to have some exposure to the business. And that was really interesting, looking at operations, looking at engineering, looking at maintenance programs, looking at licensing, looking at recruiting other pilots, and of course scheduling and those types of things, and interestingly, customers too. So I got involved with quoting for charters and engaging with clients, and so really interesting work, and bizarrely created an opportunity in some of the, I guess, foundational training for what I would discover that I would use later in broking.
That gives me an opportunity to jump in here to talk about that because, of course, yeah, those are cross-transferable skills, being able to talk to clients, being able to see and catalogue and have like time management, I suppose, as well. But then going into your sort of financial career, you said that you had people kind of approach you and be like, oh, I've got some interest here. I mean, did you have to then go through the whole process of becoming licensed and becoming accredited? Did you have that already? Like, how did you go about becoming a broker?
It depends on how far back we go. So I ended up being a financial planner in the early 2000s, and because my boss and mentor sort of encouraged me to look at business things. I started looking at all things financial services, the stock market, lending markets, and I had a small exposure just helping them finance airplanes and the like, and so it just seemed to be a natural fit. It was something I really liked, and so I started getting trained for that, and started out being trained as a planner, and then quickly bolted on mortgage broking as well. And yes, I did have to get all the licensing, and I mean times were different back then. I think these days the support is a lot better, especially from aggregators, and I mean the BDM function's always been there. Always been great sources of support and assistance, but for the poor BDMs, I mean, they must really struggle, and it would have been worse in those times trying to teach anyone who wanted to be a mortgage broker how to do their own job.
Yeah. So now you've got two careers. You're a pilot and a broker. So I imagine, when you're up there on autopilot, you're just filling out loan applications. Is that what's happening? Like, how are you doing both?
Oh, look, I wish I could do that. I'm just thinking how I could maximise my time. Bizarrely, in the plane, even on a long-haul flight, it does stay pretty busy. We've got to obviously monitor the systems, and we're checking off waypoints and checking fuel and weather and all that kind of stuff as you're going along. And, of course, there's opportunity for plenty chit-chat with your colleagues on the flight deck. So maybe one time if we can get straight through processing and we can get applications done in 5 minutes, or maybe there's an opportunity for that. And of course we need a good solid Wi-Fi connection.
Yeah, of course. Can't go over the bite.
That's right.
So the next question I was going to say, you get to the GFC and you decide, I want to get back into flying. And I can understand you think how that could make sense from a finance point of view. But GFC wasn't exactly good for aviation either. You're jumping from one profession which is struggling to another. Talk me through that. Was there like a kind of eureka moment where you thought, if I don't do this, I'll regret it forever? Well,
there was that. Okay, so for me, GFC was okay, but I was experiencing major burnout and fatigue, and we'll touch on that because that's about process and resourcing, and that's a worthwhile conversation itself. But I had never flown a jet-itis, right? So I'd managed to fly. I'd had thousands of hours at that stage flying turboprops around regionally, but I never had flown a jet yet, and so I had a real chip on my shoulder because I hadn't had that experience. And it just so happened that a friend of mine who owned another regional airline, he suggested maybe I should have a bit of a look and get retrained, and I did that, and I found it was really enjoyable, and the skills came back really rapidly. And so I spent about a year as a turboprop captain. Still hadn't flown that jet though. And so whilst the industry was a bit subdued, there's always jobs available if you push hard enough. And I ended up getting a job flying the Qantas Link regional jets, and that was fun. Had a wonderful time, and it was a nice break from finance too, because it's really fatiguing business, isn't it? Lots of reading, lots of number crunching, lots of time constraints, meeting customer demand. It can be quite tiring, and for me, I really loved this time in my life. It was wonderful. Flying all over Australia. I was flying a great plane, which I have a lot of passion for. It's a 717, just being retired now out of the Qantas Link fleet, sadly. And it was just a wonderful job.
I know you said there that in your kind of previous job you were a bit burnt out and a bit fatigued, but it still takes huge guts to have a career and go, you know what, I'm going to put this to one side and I'm going to do something different. I know you'd flown before.
Yeah,
but how do you have those conversations?
Absolutely. It was really hard because sort of entry-level jobs in flying, the remuneration is not wonderful to start with, and so I had to sort of take a bit of a step back initially from that. But you know what? I didn't really care. It was a goal I wanted to achieve, and I just felt like if I didn't have a crack and experience that, I think it's something I would have always regretted.
Did anyone try and talk you out of it? Were there family members that went, "You're mad"?
There were a few people that thought I was a bit crazy doing it, but I had one of my best mate from school, and he just said to me, he calls me Rico. Rico, they're taking anybody with a pilot's license and a heartbeat. Just give it a go, you'll be fine. And now I think that's probably a slight exaggeration, but I'm glad that I did. And from there, I've had some wonderful opportunities, So I did the Qantas Link regional jet thing for about 5 years or thereabouts. Then I did some freight with the Toll 737s for about 18 months or so. That was a lot of fun, and actually one of the most exhausting and tiring jobs I've ever done in my life, because night freight is really tough. And then eventually Qantas said, I was welcome to start with them, and that's been there. It's the best job in the world, honestly. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell them. We don't want too many people to come. But it really is. It's a wonderful job, and it really is exciting. As you're taking off and landing in a big jet, and you're going to a great destination, and there's always something interesting to do. I actually went on a trip not that long ago. I took my son and we went to where did we go? We went to the NBA and. We went and saw a comedy club. It was just great, Just you do have that opportunity, and it's a lot of fun.
In America?
Yeah, in America. Yeah.
Whereabouts?
Just to LA. Oh. So we do fly. I'm based in Brisbane presently, and our key routes are Brisbane, LA. We do that a lot. Singapore and Narita now. So Japan, fantastic. Get up there for a lovely ramen. There's always something interesting to do there in Japan as well.
I've never been to Japan. If only I knew a pilot who would take me there.
Well, There's an opportunity. We can make that happen.
I just want to jump in here because I think it's always really interesting to hear the first job that you do. So I want to know, firstly, the first loan that you wrote, and secondly, the first flight that you did.
First loan that I wrote. Now, Now, that is a tough question. That should have been on the list, I think.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. The first loan that I wrote, I'm pretty sure it would have been one of my family members. And I do remember doing one early for my sister, and they absolutely grilled me the whole way through. And I don't think I knew what I was doing, but I got a lot of help, and we have improved a lot since then.
And the first flight?
First flight, I do remember that. That was when it was one of those vomiting moments, and it was actually the 28th of February, 1992, I think was the date.
And in Victoria?
And that was in Victoria.
I was going to ask, are there any similarities between these two careers in your life? Because to be a good pilot, what I didn't understand before I started this job, you've got to be able to work with a team very quickly, make decisions under pressure. You've got to be good at multitasking. I can already see that logical brain could work in both careers. Am I right?
I think that's true. And, decision-making in flying has really improved a lot in the last couple of decades. Now we've got sort of models, if you like. So there are many decision-making models. One of the ones I learnt was a thing called DODA, which is you identify a problem, you consider some options, you decide a course of action, you might assign tasks, and then review what you do. Simple acronym, right? They have another one called a NITS briefing, so it's a structure for how you might deliver a message to passengers or cabin crew or somebody, or air traffic control even. So that'd be the nature of the NITS, N-I-T-S, so nature of the situation, your intentions, any time requirements you might have, and special considerations. So from there, you get given a bit of a logical sequence for how to formulate a message and deliver that in a way that people can, that it just makes sense. So when I was early on in my aviation career, in that management role I mentioned earlier, I learnt that a lot of structure. So in aviation, we have operations manuals, we have training manuals, we have training programs with pretty strict course outlines, and And then, of course, even the way we communicate is fairly well heavily scripted. So in your operations manual, we'll say you say these words, or if you're working in a multi-crew environment, I say do this, and you'll have a particular response, right? And they're always consistent, because it's through consistency of delivery. It's how we maintain safety margins, right? So if I said something like put gear up, and you come up with a strange response, well, we go, hold on, that's not what you're supposed to say. And so that might create a conversation. It's like, no, what do you actually mean? So consistent messaging and theming is really critical. And so if I think about how I bring that lens, or bring that to broking in the crew financial business, we're really heavily systems driven. And
got operation manuals. Absolutely,
we do. We have our own intranet that caters to everything that a broker would need, and much larger than, say, a lot of the websites that are available. It's got absolutely everything you could possibly need, so I can have a single source, and that helps me with training. It helps me with maintaining consistency, quality assurance with all the other brokers that we have.
Yeah. And so how did you end up pooling so many brokers together, and also so many that were pilots?
That's
or
true.
Are pilots?
The GFC, I'm showing my age.
COVID
did help with that. And a lot of people were looking for alternate careers. And I had the local MFAA person got approached by a number of sort of aviation people. We've even got a person who's one of our brokers is a cabin attendant. And she's with Virgin. And they're looking for opportunities, and their great idea was, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and do home loans for the aviation industry. And she said, well, there's a guy already doing that. You might want to talk to him. And what I was able to bring my experience and say, hey, look, I can train you more effectively. We can give you better systems. You won't have to manufacture or build these things yourself, and this will work. And so now I think I have got 7 aviation people working in our business, and 11 brokers total.
Wow. And so do you, you're targeting the aviation industry, so you're doing the home loans for other pilots, for cabin crew, for people working on the ground. And
we do all the airlines. We do expats as well, expat airlines. And we do normal expats, but we do specialise obviously in the aviation segment. And for us, it's about, if I think about our key comparative advantage, it would be that we have the ability to really understand what's going on inside the industry. We know what's going on with the EBAs. We know how to read all their information with a higher level of understanding than, say, a traditional broker might. So what is there any special sort of loan that a person in the aviation industry would get? Are you seeing any trends they service differently? Well, service is a really key focus, getting turnaround times down to really acceptable levels, trying to keep the documentation as low friction as possible. So our process is really, really strictly catered to that, and they are busy. They're all over the place. So being able to do remote appointments, we do almost all of our appointments on Zoom or Teams. Zoom is our preference, and we run to a strict process. And because we're so familiar with the industrial agreements, how the pay slips are all worded, there are multiple variations within these companies as well. And we do so much of it that we just know it best. Yeah. Do you find there are specific lenders that work better for your sort of clients? There are. Yeah. I don't know if I should name them. Go on. We do support Macquarie quite a lot. They're very flexible with their policies and the way that they treat non-base income. So in aviation, lots of allowances, and being able to treat those well is important. The 90-day annualisation is really important. Obviously, there are a couple of different methods for calculating that. The Macquarie one works out pretty favourably the majority of the time. But speed and efficiency is important, and for a lot of our clients who would be considered high net worth, being on point from a price point perspective is really critical too. So fees and rates are obviously important. They're not the only thing though. We do find some people have some interesting interests and they might want to buy a farm out at Willabarabak somewhere, and so looking at policy is also very important.
Yeah, I wonder though, did you ever think about doing asset finance and financing the planes?
Yeah, I did do a lot of that in my previous business. We are starting to touch and get into that space a bit more now. So, I mean, the last 5 years we've had a very heavy training focus because not everybody was highly experienced at the time. Having said that, we do have some experienced brokers now. So we're now at that point of maturity where a big chunk of our team are now very experienced in doing a range of things. So introducing more complex finance applications into our business is now top of mind. So it's definitely what we're doing for next year.
Okay, welcome back. So I want to talk to you a little bit about COVID and working during COVID and advising and working with the aviation industry, because it was a terrifying moment because a lot of people suddenly out of work, they either lost all their income or the vast majority of income. They've no idea how long this thing is going to last. How do you begin to give advice to people, during that period? Because no one really knows what's going to happen.
Well, great question. What you discover about the aviation segment, people are very resilient and very resourceful. So if you're used to if your BAU is going through the sky on a plane and you're always thinking about diversion options and what might happen if something might break, and you're predisposed to that way of thinking, when the COVID experience came around, I saw that a huge number of our colleagues rapidly pivot and go and redeploy themselves in other meaningful ways, right? So we saw lots of contract jobs get taken up. We saw lots of sort of consulting gigs just sort of seem to spring out of nowhere. There was obviously lots of opportunity in government. I saw a lot of my colleagues get pretty good roles in government with the COVID response. I didn't see many people being idle at all. In fact, there was one lady I remember, she came back to me, she wanted a loan, and she'd got a job doing the safety but on the side of the road, doing the lollipop thing, and that was actually I was surprisingly well paid.
Oh.
And
unions
yeah,
got their back.
They've got their back. Yeah, so people did all sorts of interesting things. Very few people seemed to be idle.
It's interesting because during COVID, one of the things that Alan Joyce would say in every other interview, he used to say, in the aviation industry, there's a crisis every 7 years. And it was almost like, if you work in the industry, you've kind of got to expect that every so often things go wrong. And one of the things I heard is that the older pilots and older people in the industry were kind of like, we've seen all this before, we've seen a crisis. But for some of the younger ones, it was a bit more terrifying. Did you find that when you were doing advice as well? Was it the case that, some people were terrified about their futures and others just got on with it?
I think I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I'm so conditioned to a crisis. There's been so many. Obviously, we had the tech wreck in 2000, then we had SARS not long after, then there's a GFC, and it's just been, and now obviously COVID. It does come around pretty routinely. For the younger people, I think that, it would have been a shock for them because we had come out of some pretty buoyant times. It had been a long time since we'd had anything really bad happen. So it definitely was a shock, but people were still resilient and got out there and made themselves useful. I don't think the lockdowns, they certainly didn't help. The older guys and girls, they got out and they got employed pretty readily. So I think, just in response to your question, talking about resilience really, I think that should we ever see another crisis again, hopefully it's not a pandemic, I think that, the learnings from this one, I think that the young people going forward, I think they'll be well placed. I think it's been big focus on savings over the last couple of years, and we've seen savings increase over time. So that's I think maybe society is saying that we need to have a bit of money put aside for a rainy day. It certainly was a very long rainy day, wasn't it?
It never seemed to end. So you've had COVID. You've then kind of gone back to what you did before. COVID kind of ends. The world goes back to normal. And then this opportunity comes up at Qantas superannuation. I mean, you must have walked that job. I mean, they're like, we need one person with two things. There's no one in Australia apart from one man. How did that all come about?
There was an opportunity where the previous pilot representative resigned from the board. He'd reached his tenure. I think he'd done more than 3 terms. And an opportunity come up for me to nominate. And it's been a wonderful experience. My colleagues voted me in as their representative, and I've had a great time ever since. And it's interesting getting to see how a large-scale business operates, and just looking at their procedures and the way that they manage risk and the way that they manage people. Really super impressive, and I've been very fortunate to be able to be exposed to that.
How do you juggle all these different things? Because when you first kind of decided you were going to fly jets, you said before a lot of it was because you had a bit of burnout, it's time for a change. You must be even more tired now. How do you do all this?
I do get tired, that is true, and that's probably a complaint from my children, I think. Managing time is really, really important. So I don't have many free spots in my diary. If I'm not flying somewhere, then I'm probably doing alone. And this week I've been doing work with Qantas, and that's taken a big chunk out. But no, I don't have much spare time. I don't recommend this lifestyle for normal people.
Don't recommend having 3 jobs. Yeah. No. How do you then unwind and de-stress? I mean, 'cause how do you manage your own mental health and avoiding burnout?
Yeah, good question. Well, there's a couple of things I have put in place that were different. Talk about to the last time I ran a finance business. One is having a good structure and team. I'll answer your question in a minute, but having a good structure and team, having solid processes that are tested, helps you leverage your time. And in terms of what I do, one of the fun things I've been doing lately, I have a 19-year-old son. He's actually learning to fly as well. And he and I have been doing indoor skydiving together. That's been a heap of fun.
Have you ever done that?
No.
I've never done that.
No.
It sounds
I
terrifying.
strongly recommend it. Go and have a go. It is a heap of fun. Embarrassingly, I think I've done about 6 hours of it now.
Wow.
And at 2-minute lots, it's a few times inside the wind tunnel.
Yeah.
I wish I was better. The bit that really stinks is my 19-year-old, he gets in there and he's doing all these cool tricks now. And even though I've tried to sneak in a few extra lessons, and he's just so much better.
Does that mean that you're going to next do skydiving as well, like out of an actual plane?
Absolutely. I'll better get a good insurance policy beforehand, though.
I'm not sure the passengers want to know the pilot wants to jump out of the plane.
Thankfully, the doors don't open in flight. You can't do that.
You said there your son now wants to get into the business. Does that come from you? Where did his passion come from?
So I have 3 sons. All of them are going through sort of some kind of pilot training.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So my eldest son, he's at the Defence Force Academy now, and he's slated to be an ADF pilot. So hopefully next year we'll see him learning how to fly.
Exciting.
I'm super jealous. So, how cool is the PC-21 and some of the military hardware? It's just amazing. So I'm watching him, and it's really cool. And but I'm not going to lie, when he gets in there and he starts fanging around in those little turboprop planes, I'm going to be a little bit jealous. But yeah, so they were looking around and trying to find what job might be cool, and they said, "Oh, look, Dad, we see you doing the finance thing, and I don't really want to be an accountant, or I don't really want to be a mortgage broker, or I don't want to be a tradie. I think I'll just do that." And anyway, they had the aptitude, and they're off doing it. So that's really excited. My youngest son, he's going through a conventional flying school up on the Gold Coast, and he's really enjoying that experience. And he got himself a job as a baggage handler out at the airport. So he's sort of doing that whilst he's getting licensed. So hopefully he's got a bright future ahead. My middle son's decided he wants to go Defence Force as well.
Wow.
So
That's quite the story, because when there's 4 of you qualified, then there can't be many other families in Australia that can say that.
I think there are a few in Qantas, but there wouldn't be many.
No.
So no, exciting. So I'm really stoked for those guys. I'm really proud of what they're achieving, and also a little bit jealous at the same time.
And the next thing I was going to ask you, is it the case that your flying career or flying the A330s is a thing that can't change in your schedule? I would imagine everything revolves around that. Am I right?
Yeah, very much. I mean, the rostering people try to help us. We do get to bid. We put in a request to have certain days off or certain trips, but airlines are very seniority driven. So if I wanted to do a particular trip on a Thursday and somebody who is more senior than me wants to do the same trip, or they'll get it before I do. So there is a bit of hit and miss with the scheduling. You put in your requests and a roster will be published and you've got to go and perform that. And then I fit everything else around the side.
I was going to say, finally for my aviation questions, you're flying the A330. It's a big old aircraft, but is the plan to progress, if that's the right word from that? Would you like to be on those A380s, on the Dreamliners? Is there like a next step for you?
Great question. There's a lot of things that influence the type of airplane you want to fly. I really love the A330. I think it's a great plane. It will be replaced by the A350s that will be coming soon. I think that when they come along, I'll be pretty excited to move them. I'm not so sure about moving back to a Boeing because my brain's programmed Airbus now, and it's a big step to defrag and clear all that out, empty that memory bank, and move back to the Boeing. I think the Airbus product is pretty amazing, so I'm pretty excited to see the A350 come. But it is base dependent, so the airline will get a fleet of planes, and they'll base them in certain locations. Sydney and Melbourne are always the first places to start. So it depends on what comes to Brisbane, because the decision for us is, okay, well, unless I want to move towns, which many guys do commute for to fly in a particular base or a particular airplane, or even to have a set route structure. So in Brisbane on the A330, there are really only 3 destinations for us at this time. Perhaps as the airline gets more equipment, they might make more routes available, but that's very much dependent on how they see the commercial landscape going forward. The routes out of Sydney are probably the best. I was based in Sydney with the airline for some time, and I think there's more like 8 or 10 destinations we could go to. Then there's quite a lot. The 787, for example, ultra long haul, they primarily use those for your Londons and your LA trips, Pacific trips. So the machines are allocated based on the need and their capability. So the A330 for us is primarily set up for more Asia flying. Asia flying is great for me though, because it keeps my body in the same time zone, and things like the jet lag is less of a problem.
Now I know you're based in Brisbane at the moment, but if you were to move back to Sydney in the next few years, would you be throwing your hat in the ring to be doing those Project Sunrise flights, which are going to be, that is the moment. That's going to be the moment.
Have you ever sat in a room for 22 hours straight and not left it? Yeah, I probably will put my hand up for it. I think it'll be interesting. The plan is to have a bit of a mixture. So you do a couple of the long flights, and then you might do some shorter stuff in the roster as well. So I think they're pretty sensible about how they're thinking of using staff or using pilots and deploying them, because I don't think you could do too many of those in a roster. I'd like to go to London, though. I think it'd be great. Big Ben, I'm going.
Have you ever been?
No, I've never been there. I've never done Europe.
Well, this is the opportunity.
Yeah.
I think it is, yeah. I better sign up. Bring on the Project Sunrise.
And so then finally, we've talked about your aviation career, but what is the future for you in terms of this mix of things you've got going on? How long can you keep this up for? And is there going to come a point where you're going to obviously drop the financial side to concentrate on your true love of aviation?
Look, it's such a tough question. I get very different things out of both industries. Absolutely. I love going to work and flying somewhere. And it's not often I think you can say you turn up to work and it's exciting. You know, every time I turn up to the airline, it's a joy. And hence why I'm happy to encourage my sons to do it. But I get different things. See, it's a very rigid environment. So when we're looking at, say something were to happen in the airplane, there's some kind of emergency procedure. Well, that is heavily scripted, right? So, you know, you'll press this button, you'll say these words, you'll perform these actions, and you'll follow a strict sequence, right? Now, that whilst it's essential for operational safety, it's not a very creative outlet, right? You get to make some decisions. You might look at if you're going to divert somewhere, you'll consider the weather, you'll consider the facilities available, you consider the fuel you've got and whether that's possible, and then you'll execute that. But beyond that, I don't feel that there's a lot of latitude for creativity. So in my financial services life, there's absolute creativity. So we get to decide not only the airplane we're going to fly on, we get to decide the journey to the destination and even who we're going to bring along as passengers, right? So that I think is really, really exciting, and that's something that I can't get easily out of flying the jet.
So I think finance wins there, Adam.
You turned it around right at the end. But it's amazing that you've got such a passion for two different things. That's quite unusual.
Finance is a wonderful business. You know, it's brought a lot to me, and it's a tremendous privilege to be able to help people get into a home. You know, it really is. Okay, so on one side in the plane, we're providing safety. Hopefully, we're doing a good job economically, so the business or the airline can make money. With financial services, we're helping improve people's lives. We're helping them achieve that dream home, maybe help improve their retirement outcomes, and helping them progress with their families. And certainly we've got a lot of multi-generational customers, right? And so both things offer great opportunity.
I suppose the similarity, and I spoke earlier about what the core skills were, but in terms of the benefits, if in aviation and in financial side, you're dealing with people and you're helping people, and I suppose that is the same skill set, or that is the same benefit on both of those things. Absolutely. We don't get to speak to as many people from the flight deck as we used to. Unfortunately, we can't.
I know, you used to be able to go up and meet the captain. I used to love that when I was a kid.
You can meet them before and afterwards. You're just not allowed to look out the window when we're
going to the cockpit. Yeah.
That was a great thing. I remember doing that on an Air New Zealand Jumbo one day, and I thought, this is amazing. These guys, they must be geniuses.
They were the best. Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I remember going into the cockpit and being like, these people are amazing. And also freaking out when you look out the windscreen. You're like, oh my God, we're in the clouds.
It's so much fun. And I've just forgotten you.
Sorry, that was my fault. I distracted you.
You threw me off there. But it's the two careers offer vastly different things. The future for me and Crew Financial, yes, I will continue this journey. I have a partner that assists me now, and he and I together, we work out strategy. And he's a pilot as well. It's Matt Clark, and he actually is a trainer of Qantas pilots as well. So.
You guys just bored, I think. You know, you've got too much time on your hand. It sounds like you're just like inventing more careers. I mean, don't understand where you get any sleep.
Idle minds bring the devil's work or something. What's
idle
saying?
hands. Yeah. So you're looking obviously then at bringing someone in to sort of manage the workload. So Matt's helping you do the operational side of things.
Yeah. So if we look at our business and how we're sort of, I know, is that what you want to talk about now? Okay, great, cool. So there's a couple of tenets that I bring from flying into our business. One of them is that consistency. So I mentioned before about the standard operating procedures, this type of thing. Well, by bringing that into what we do, it means a few things. We can have, from a customer perspective, we can deliver on expectations more easily. We can manage them and set them better, and we can deliver consistent outcomes. From a workload perspective, and we're doing quite a lot of loans now. We do couple of hundred a year, and obviously me doing all that would not be possible, and doing these other things. So having a well-resourced team that also know how to prosecute their role and have clear lines of where their roles are clearly identified and they know exactly what they're doing. It brings consistency as well. And so, and then from our brokers, we're very, very deliberate about how they deliver their content to our support team. So I think to do this job well into the future and be scalable, and scalability is something we really focus on, not just scalability though in lending operations, right? So I think that you need to have scalability across a range of areas. You need to have scale. If you want to go and build a larger business, and that's our intention now, you need to have scalability in training. You need to have scalability in onboarding, HR. You need to have scalability in marketing. You need to have scalability in what I call lending operations, which is that loan production, application to approval piece. You need to have scalability in the formal approval to settlements piece. So we make sure we segment our business and we put in the resources where required. And obviously leveraging technology is key.
What tech do you use?
So we use a few different platforms. We use Sales Tracker or through our aggregator Specialist Finance Group. Their products SFG Connect, really awesome bit of gear. In fact, I chose them because of the software, and it turned out we ended up with a wonderful aggregation group, and we really love their support. So Sales Tracker was the first thing. We also run Go High Level for retention, for Google, for lead gen, for calendar appointments. We did have a whole range of different pieces of software. We had Calendly for calendars. We had other things and it was just too many pieces of software. We were able to amalgamate those and bring them into a central solution, which is really handy. We use Employment Hero for HR. So having a lot more people, more than just myself and a couple of others, we need to obviously have solid HR procedures in place. And we run our own intranet as well.
Wow.
So
did you build that yourself?
We built that ourselves, yeah.
And why?
Because I couldn't find anything that could actually centralize all of the documents we needed, all the training places we needed, all the lender websites we needed. So the idea was, how do we get to that place? I had a few trainees, and people would consistently ask me, where do I find this? Where do I find that? It was driving me crazy, and there was no off-the-shelf solution to do that. And so I thought, right, what's every possible question that a broker might ask? And so I created this intranet, and it literally has, when I say everything, I really do mean everything, even down to what motor vehicle servicing costs are. It's got everything. Every calculator under the sun they could possibly need, every industry website, every regulator website, every bank website, it has everything.
I reckon you're going to get some brokers now knocking your door being like, can we have this, please? That sounds good.
Well, how did this happen? It came to me out of need, like absolute need, right? I needed a scenario where it wasn't just nice to have to be able to run an efficient business. Like I absolutely required it from the first day. And because I can't be flying a plane somewhere if I can't also do that job. And so scalability in how we deliver our customer, how we get information is really key. And now that I had these extra trainees as well, I needed scalability around how do I help them find what to do, because this is taking a lot of my time. I can't, hand to mouth lead everybody to everything. And we built a huge cache of training videos as well. We actually have our own Crew Broker Academy now, and that covers almost all the other stuff you could possibly need to be a broker, because there's a real gap in the market for quality training. Unfortunately, people come out of their diploma or certificate courses and they're just simply unable to perform the role. So I needed to bridge that gap rapidly. So tech, sales trekker, go high level, employment hero, our intranet. And there's probably a couple of other things I've forgotten.
Anna, do you have any more aviation questions?
No, I don't. I think I'm all right.
All right, I'm going to jump in with a couple more broken questions. That's okay. You mentioned about how during COVID-19, obviously all the pilots got stood down, and this is where a lot of your team expanded through the MFAA sort of recommending that, hey, Rick's already doing this, maybe go join him. But what was it like servicing your clients? Because all of your clients, obviously in the aviation industry, would have suddenly found themselves with no income. You mentioned about them being able to pivot, but how did they service? Because all of your book pretty much would have been suddenly without income sources.
There were a number of banks that were willing to do dollar for dollar refinances, and they were willing to do that to drop rates down. So that was a period of opportunity. There were people who were more responsibly geared who we were able to help. We did several hundred people through that time, and a lot of them actually were able to pivot into incomes that were still pretty strong. But then they had tenure in role type issues, and we were able to negotiate some pretty good terms with a couple of the lenders that were willing to take on that business.
That's good. So if you had, though, like clients coming to you who may be in the midst of getting an application done on the basis of their POIG income as a pilot, or maybe not, as self-employed, depending on what their model is. How did you then sort of get their deals across the line? Because
it was very much a case by case. I mean, you couldn't do absolutely everybody. If somebody didn't have income, clearly you couldn't, do something for them. So they needed to have some kind of income. You still had to find a level of capacity. Now, it might not mean that you're able to do the $2 or $3 million loan that they were able to do beforehand, but you might be able to do something else.
Yeah. And when it comes to then the marketing side of things, like I always assumed that you were actually sort of, doing this while you're on the flight. So like while you're doing your safety briefing to the passengers, you're like, and by the way, if you need a home loan.
I wish the airline would let me do that.
Yeah. An abusive position maybe, just being like, I'll get you there safely and also I can help you out with your house.
And also the landing is going to be better if you complete this survey.
Exactly. Just give us your fact find as you leave. Thank you. But yeah, I think so it's aviation industry. It's not customers from the airline. So how do you target though your clients? Is it all word of mouth referrals?
Predominantly has been word of mouth. But and we've been doing a good job, right? So, really consistent delivery of service. We've been able to get probably better outcomes than a lot of our competitors have been able to achieve. There have been a lot of people, in fact, I do remember a couple of scenarios through COVID. In fact, there was times where pilots were still working. Not everybody was completely stood down, but there was one deal that came to me and we were able to get them approved when the others weren't. It's just because they didn't really fully understand how it all bolted together well. So we were able to get better outcomes. But in terms of the marketing, yes, there is a huge reliance on word of mouth that has come from doing a good job. But we are moving into a future where we're going to be doing more deliberate marketing through social media, through print media, through associations and collaborations with other websites. And whilst we have our aviation industry focus, if I think about the one thing that's really important about that is that there's a peculiarity. There's something interesting around how their incomes are derived. And so we are also targeting a few other industries as well, where there are nuances with industrial agreements and nuances with how they might get non-base income. And so there's about 5 other industries that we're targeting as well.
Can I ask what they are?
Obviously, everyone does healthcare. So,
yeah.
I mean, and if you think about doctors, well, they've got complexity, right? And if I think, okay, so what does that really mean? It's saying, okay, well, people who have some complexity really have a greater need for advice, right? Anybody can do an application where somebody's coming up with 2 payslips and it's straightforward income. There's nothing non-base, and they're buying in a metro area. Any broker could do that, and discussion is really about, well, what interest rate can you get me, and what turnaround time are you going to give me? Whereas this other scenario, we're saying, okay, well, yes, interest rate and speed and fees are very important, but what other things are here where we can bring advice to the table? And that's how we can add extra value.
Just before I let you go, Rick, I'd be keen to know your advice for other brokers and also for other pilots. Firstly, let's start with our beat. So brokers, if you could think about your career so far and what you've seen over your years of experience, and of course with your team as well, maybe top 3 tips you'd give people in succeeding in broking.
Okay, scalability is king. I think that the most important thing you can do is just get out of dealing with problems that should be automated. So leverage technology is the most important thing. And if I think about my own journey, that was the very first thing I did. I'd been with 2 aggregators previously who had very cumbersome, labour-intensive CRMs, right? And so the very first move I made was to find a CRM where I could cut down my labour, because it's not an okay comparison to go and use outsourced labour from Asia, right, as a Band-Aid to cover up for the inefficiencies of technology, right? So that's number 1, technology first. That way you can leverage time. Number 2 would be to make sure that your process is predefined. So everything about our process is completely structured. There's no ambiguity. Everybody knows what the SLAs are required to be. Everybody knows the content that we're required to put in place to have a loan proceed with us, from my brokers to my support team to our settlements team. So having a strict process will help you do a couple of things. It will help you be able to set customer expectations. You'll be able to improve quality and quality assurance. Right, so with us, we do our quality assurance through as the file's being built. And by the time it gets lodged, it's already completely compliant. It's much better than having your compliance audit down the track and then having to go digging around for documents. So these things that look like they're little bits of extra work initially actually save you lots and lots of hours down the track. Standardising your broker submissions to your banks. And I think that is really, really key. For us, the minute that we did that, we were able to reduce our RFI count by 90% and get our turnaround times down. So we've got a standard procedure that we follow absolutely religiously every single time. And that's then improved. A couple of things. It's improved our banking relationships, because the banks that we do submit to love our applications. They have very little problems with them. And so our quality metrics are very high. Improves our customer experience and the customer journey, because they're being hassled a lot less. Improves compliance outcomes, and compliant business is good business.
And pilots, I mean, Adam, I don't know if your aviation listeners want to know top tips for new pilots. Or
they do, because we've got a talent shortage. We need to get more pilots in. What's your advice to a younger person sort of thinking of getting in the profession?
Well, first of all, I obviously completely encourage it, because I've encouraged my 3 sons to do it. Advice is this: pay attention at school, get reasonable grades, go and look for a high quality training establishment, and if you can possibly apply for one, try and get into a cadetship. So there are several great ones. Qantas has a training program at WellCamp, and they're trying to get new people in the door there, because there is obviously a future training demand that's pretty large. It needs to be met. Regional Express, I think, still offer a good program as far as cadetships are concerned. So if you can possibly get into an organisation and start working as a pilot as soon as possible, that's great, as opposed to what I had to do, which is wash aeroplanes, and I wouldn't recommend anybody do that. But that's what you needed to do after the pilot strike. That's
good advice. Work hard. Find a good place to start.
Find a good place. Really work hard on your training. Attention to detail is really critical.
That's
I think that's
yeah. You done?
I'm done.
Yeah, all right.
Fantastic.
Rick Garner, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your story both as a broker at Crew Financial and leading your Crew Financial team, but of course also as a pilot and as a non-executive director for Qantas Superannuation. A busy man.
Very busy. I don't know how you do.
Thanks
Amazing.
so much for having me, guys.
If you've got any questions for me, then feel free to reach out. You can reach me at editor@theadvisor.com.au. Of course, check out Crew Financial to find out how Crew are also supporting the great Australian dream. And we'll catch you next time for another episode on the Advisor Podcast Network.